Good morning and welcome to Rising. You are not still dreaming, you are awake. Ryan Grim is back in the chair with us. Welcome, Ryan.
Could never say no to you, Robbie.
Oh, thank you, Ryan. All right, well, we've got an exciting show today. We're going to get into Biden's sinking approval ratings with the panel. Then we're going to discuss the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp trial with a special guest. But first, a few monkeypox cases have been popping up in the U.S. since last week. The rare disease was first confirmed in a Massachusetts man who had traveled to Canada last Wednesday, and a man in New York City is being tested as he had tested positive for orthopox virus, which belongs to the same family of viruses as monkeypox. And now Florida officials are investigating a presumptive monkeypox case, making it the third possible case of the virus in the states.
According to ABC News, public health officials and infectious disease experts are emphasizing that the risk remains low. Here's Biden's remarks on the cases yesterday.
We've had this monkeypox in the larger numbers in the past, number one. Number two, we have vaccines to take care of it. Number three, there is, thus far, there doesn't seem to be a need for any kind of extra effort beyond what's going on. And so I just don't think it rises to the level of the kind of concern that existed with COVID-19 and the smallpox vaccine works for it. So, but I think people should be careful.
Biden's comments there were significantly different from just the day before when he seemed much more concerned.
But it is something that everybody should be concerned about. We're working on it hard to figure out what we do and what vaccine, if any, may be available for it. But it is a concern in the sense that if it were to spread, it's consequential.
I'm sure public health officials are licking their lips at the opportunity to get us back in mass and back under restrictions, but caution does not seem to. The freak out behavior doesn't seem.
Well, there's no sense that this is necessarily airborne,
right?
At this point, which is where the freak out really starts to come, because if it's not, it's not, surface or airborne can both be extremely contagious. This seems to be mostly sexually transmitted.
They're
at this point
describing it that way, yes, affecting I think gay men, or it's maybe in other places in Europe where they've had the outbreaks. It was concentrated among those populations. This previous outbreak in 2003 that this Business Insider piece references was due to sustained animal contact with prairie dogs. And then there's a photo of the family who all got monkeypox, just like cuddling their prairie dog. So
yeah.
Don't do that.
It's a hideous infection.
It's really
awful.
bad. Yeah, you don't want to get it.
And can be fatal as well. Not just like painful
right.
and these lesions last, but can be fatal to people as well.
Right.
Like Biden said, there are apparently vaccine treatments, and also, if we understand how it's passing, then it's easier to keep it under control. There's that famous joke about the guy goes to the doctor. And he's like, it hurts when I go like this. And the doctor's like, well, then don't go like this.
Don't do that.
Yes. Not quite that simple. And you and I were talking about, I don't know if we have, one of the most hypocritical posts ever. There's this guy
Greg Gonsalves?
I can't remember who it is, but he's been out there basically pushing.
He's a Yale public health official.
Pushing very hard.
Greg Gonsalves,
for the most restrictive approach to schooling when it comes to children and COVID. Like even today, really hammering the message that you cannot send these kids into these schools because it's going to create all these spreader events. He put out a message yesterday. It said something like, well, if you tell gay men not to have sex parties just because of monkeypox, then it's going to blow the credibility of public health officials. They're like, actually, I agree with you on that point. Be safe.
Also
be
on
safe
the masking
in how you handle
of
this.
kids.
But
yeah.
You can't all of a sudden say that, well, we can't now stop all of the sex parties just because there's monkeypox, but also say we need to shut down all the schools. It's like you start to lose credibility when
you know how I feel about it. Neither the schools nor the sex parties should be shut down.
Keep them all open.
That's right.
Although maybe the sex parties, when it comes to COVID, probably not necessarily a good idea.
Leave the mask at home.
Difficult.
Leave the mask. Well, if the sex party calls for that's a whole different thing. Anyway,
everybody's vaccinated and it's outdoors. It's fine.
So the vaccines for monkeypox. So this was approved back in 2019 by the FDA when the agency had approved a smallpox and a monkeypox vaccine. And at that time, the FDA's director of biological evaluation and research had said, quote, although naturally occurring smallpox disease is no longer a global threat, the intentional release of this highly contagious virus could have a devastating effect. And my understanding is, so they can give this vaccine to people who are maybe thought to have had contact with a known case of someone who had monkeypox. And then also they can give it to you if you have monkeypox as like a therapeutic. So obviously won't prevent you from getting it because you already have it, but that it works incredibly well as in both cases, as prevention and then as treatment.
And it's already whipping up conspiracy theories, though, right? Like there's already people are like coming after Bill Gates. Like, clearly, Bill Gates kicked off the monkeypox thing. I understand people's sense of dread and also like throwing their hands up, like just seriously. Now we got monkeypox. Like it's just one thing after another, and then there are these hepatitis cases going around in young children. It just feels like we can't catch a break.
Well, I think the media salience now of an infectious disease is very high because of COVID, because of how interested the news media is in it. It probably is the case that this kind of thing, this kind of outbreak is something that occurs, just every now and then, and it's not. Years, This is not that bad. Like it's not. We don't have to worry about our old and vulnerable people catching this thing in great numbers.
Unless they're at sex parties.
Because they're probably not at sex parties. If they have prairie dogs,
it might be in the villages.
Take them away.
Yeah.
You're having fun this morning, Ryan. He's happy to be back in the chair.
That's right.
So it's not something we need to really panic about, but it is hideous looking. I don't think we showed any of the pictures of it. Don't Google it if you have a weak stomach. It is ugly looking.
You don't want that stuff.
But as you mentioned, yes, internet sleuths have begun to point the fingers at Bill Gates, and the hashtag Bill Gates Bioterrorist started to trend on Twitter. Kim Iverson started that one.
Yes.
Just kidding. After a clip of Gates predicting the next pandemic would be pox made the rounds. Let's watch that.
So I'm hoping in 5 years I can write a book called, We Are Ready for the Next Pandemic. But it'll take tens of billions in R&D that the US and the UK will be part of that. It'll take probably about $1 billion a year for a pandemic task force at the WHO level, which is doing the surveillance and actually doing what I call germ games, where you practice. You say, okay, what if a bioterrorist brought smallpox to 10 airports? How would the world respond to that? That there's naturally caused epidemics and bioterrorism caused epidemics that could even be way worse than what we experience today. And yet the advances in medical science should give us tools that we could do dramatically better.
And there's the way he says that is in fact kind of creepy. And I was joking before. What I agree with Kim on is that there's a certain enjoyment in governing people and setting rules for people, and in experimentation that comes through in a lot of what the public health establishment sounds like when they talk about these things. And they have, with the gain of function research, with those kinds of things that we are concerned about, have shown an indifference to side effects from research. They don't want scrutiny, they don't want transparency, they don't want to be told they can't do it. And there's an experimentation mindset that comes through in remarks like that
Right.
I think can be concerning.
Yeah, and so this was from November 2021, and Gates was explaining why the World Health Organization would need an extra $1 billion a year for a global pandemic task force, which is what he said in that video. I wish he would focus more on the risks of some of this. So when he alludes to surveillance, all right, surveillance, okay, yes, but surveillance can also be risky. Surveillance can mean sending people, researchers, into bat caves in places outside of Wuhan or Western China, and grabbing samples, and then taking those samples back to a lab and studying those samples. Doesn't even necessarily mean you're adding any function to them. You're just studying them and trying to figure out, because there is a rationale to it. It's like, okay, we need to know what's in this cave, because these bats go in and out of the cave, and because there's so much crowding of human population toward these areas, that there could be some interaction between this cave and the people, or livestock, and the livestock and then the people. So there's some obvious benefit to knowing that. At the same time, people like Gates need to recognize the risk of doing that as well, because now you're taking what could be a virus that was never going to leave that cave, carrying it out of the cave, and bringing it back to the lab. And there are plenty of people who think that that is a perfect explanation for actually what happened with coronavirus.
And the issue being that we don't even have a lot of good evidence. No one has really made the argument that even doing that kind of surveillance has a benefit. So it's not even like we have to stack that against the possible harms.
Right.
We don't have a benefit to even stack against
Right, because you just get a list of the things that are dangerous, and you're like, okay, these things are dangerous. And the best example,
and now they're dangerous because you listed them, because you took them out of you went into the cave to count them.
The best example being, if you don't believe that COVID came out of the lab, and instead you believe that it originated in this seafood market, this seafood market was walking distance from one of the best funded surveillance labs in the world. So these labs are in charge of surveilling the viruses around the entire globe. They couldn't find one that originated somewhere they could walk in their lunch hour. That's their own theory.
Right.
Like, that's their own theory.
Right.
A lot of people think it actually came from their lab. But if it didn't come from their lab, it was right under their noses and they missed it.
Right. This outbreak, sure, say it originates from the wet market. Yeah. Right. They're supposed to be tracking these. The outbreak is raging. Oh yeah, there it is.
Oh, by the way, yeah.
There.
But hey, there's an outbreak.
Good job, everybody. Good job, everybody.
Guys, an outbreak. Yeah, and then they sit on it for weeks. So, right. So in order to have all of these risks to human civilization, you have to demonstrate some benefits. And so far, you're right, they haven't.
Right. Well, we'll continue to monitor the monkeypox situation, and I'll have my radar coming up next. Stay tuned.